What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of one Harley Quinn. That is one long-ass movie title, so for the sake of this review, I will just be calling it Birds of Prey from now on. So Birds of Prey is the follow-up to Suicide Squad, starring Will Smith as Deadshot, as well as Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. And I think without a doubt, one of the biggest standouts, or two of the biggest standouts of that film, were Will Smith as Deadshot, and more importantly, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. And I use the term follow-up rather than sequel when I talk about this film because it's definitely more of a follow-up than a sequel. And what I mean by that is this film does such a great job of really just being its own thing. It really does not rely on the events of Suicide Squad outside of a few moments of dialogue and a couple little Easter eggs and one flashback sequence in this film. Outside of that, this film really stands on its own. It does a great job of giving you the exposition that you need to know about this character and setting you up for really just a Harley Quinn film on its own. For the most part, you can watch this movie without having watched Suicide Squad and you'll be totally fine. So let's get into my thoughts on this film. Did I like this movie? Yeah, I had a good time with it. I did thoroughly enjoy it. I think the biggest standout things about this film, without a doubt, are gonna be Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. I mean, she really is just so great in the role. If you liked her as Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad, I think you'll have a really good time with her in this film. She does a great job of expanding upon the character. She does a great job of really just being that character. I think she really embodies Harley Quinn in such a unique and fun way. She does a great job of embodying the character that you know and love from the comic books, as well as in a lot of ways just being her own thing. She does such a great job of making her own version of the character that feels very unique while also being very true to who Harley Quinn is. And this movie is definitely a unique approach to the character of Harley Quinn. You know, she's always been so heavily tied to the Joker and kind of just being his, you know, side piece, this character that's kind of abused by him. And there have been comics and books and TV series that have, you know, kind of touched on that touchy subject and kind of expanded upon that a little bit more and kind of tried to shake up that relationship a little bit. However, I think this movie does the most as far as making Harley Quinn her own character and kind of pushing the Joker aside and allowing her to shine without him really being the focal point. I thoroughly enjoyed Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn in this film, and she's easily the biggest standout that this film has. Outside of Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, the other shining character and actor in this film would be Ewan McGregor as Black Mask. I love seeing this character brought to the big screen in such a different and unique way. He definitely has his own feel and vibe. Ewan McGregor is such a great actor. He's so funny in this film while also being very unsettling and kind of creepy at a lot of times, but he actually was definitely the one who made me laugh the most. Harley Quinn definitely had her moments that made me laugh, and there's other characters that made me laugh here and there, but yeah, I found most of my laughs came from Ewan McGregor as Black Mask, and just to see characters like Black Mask brought to the big screen is just so amazing. One of the things I really love about watching comic book adaptations brought to the big screen, you know, whether they're good, bad, doesn't really matter, is the fact that we get to see some of these characters that I never thought would be able to be brought to a big screen for a modern audience or just a casual movie audience. I love it. Being able to see Ewan McGregor put on that helmet, that mask, that black mask, that skull mask is so awesome. We really haven't seen much of it in the marketing, so obviously if you know about this character, you know it's going to happen in the film, but what's cool is that there really isn't much in the marketing, and I probably won't put any of that in this review, but yeah, it was really, really cool to see him as that character and be able to kind of be wacky and silly and kind of over the top. I love Ewan McGregor as a performer, and I just really enjoyed him in this role. Now, without a doubt, though I love this film, I think I just have to be objective and say the biggest gripes I had with this film would be the narrative. It has a very straightforward story once you get into the movie, but there's a good chunk of the movie, I would say like the first half of the movie, that feels a little bit all over the place. They do something similar to what they did in Suicide Squad, where they have one character kind of narrating and explaining who the different various characters in the movie are. And in this movie, it's Harley Quinn. She's kind of just explaining who characters are. You'll see a character appear, it'll freeze frame on them, their name will pop up and, you know, some information about them. She kind of explains who they are, and then the movie continues. And the first hour of the film feels like it does that quite a lot. And I didn't hate it, but it definitely wasn't my favorite thing about this movie. It felt like it was jumping around a lot and just a lot of exposition, a lot of explaining, and that it took a little bit for the story to really build up. The basic premise of this film, once it does ramp up, is the fact that Harley Quinn has now left the Joker. She wants to do her own thing. She wants to be on her own. She doesn't want to feel so tied to the Joker. She's over him, and she just wants to kind of do her own thing. And in leaving the Joker and kind of letting the world know that she's not with the Joker anymore, there's a huge target on her back. People who have wanted to kill her and just have all these vendettas against her Joker, who were afraid to go after her because she was with the Joker, no longer are afraid, and she's kind of got this huge target on her back. In the midst of it, there's this diamond that Black Mask wants, and it lands in the hands of this young girl, and Harley Quinn kind of has to work with this young girl to get her to safety while also working for Black Mask. And I won't get too much deeper into it. There are a bunch of other characters involved in this mess, and yeah, on an overall level, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I did have a good time. However, I do have to objectively say the story felt really sloppy in the first part of the movie. It felt a little all over the place, and I felt like a lot of the movie tonally was a little all over the place. There were these moments where it was really serious, really grounded, and you felt like you were getting a character study of Harley Quinn. And then there's these moments where it's just these big cartoony comic book live action moments, which you always have to expect from this kind of movie, but I think there was times where it felt a little muddled. I think without a doubt, one thing that I can never deny about this movie is that visually it's a spectacle. This film is a lot of style, and I would say just a little bit less substance when it comes to the narrative. I didn't really find myself too gripped or just into the narrative. I didn't really find myself too attached to any of the characters, and I think as a comic book fan going into this, and I already have all this knowledge of who these characters are, I'm able to, kind of add my attachment to those characters from the comics into this movie. But as a movie on its own, it really didn't do a lot to get me attached to a lot of these characters. There's a lot of characters you'll see on the posters or just in the trailer who don't have a lot of screen time, and they play their role in the film. But you just kind of have to accept who they are in the movie, and when you're watching it, you think, oh, I'm not really too invested in this version of the character and what their story is, because it feels like I've learned most of my stuff about them via exposition. I by no means disliked this movie or hated this movie, but I just definitely felt like the story could have been a lot stronger. I wasn't as gripped to the characters and the narrative as I really would have liked to have been. But like I mentioned, this movie is big on style. The visuals, the color palette, the overall just costume design, the character design, the action. The action is really good in this movie. I thoroughly enjoyed watching all the action sequences. They were really well done, especially in the third act. The whole last section of the film, as far as action, is just so over the top, cartoony, comic book nonsense. And I think that that's either going to work for some people or not work for some. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think they did a really good job of keeping just light-hearted, over-the-top action movie kind of feel to the movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. There are these moments where Harley kind of has to learn something about herself, where it kind of feels like it goes in a different direction from the more goofy comic book cartoony feel that the rest of the movie has. However, I did enjoy those moments, and even though I felt like there was a clash in tone at times, I was really into what was happening, and I really enjoy all these actors playing these characters. And that's one thing that kind of bothered me about the fact that some of these characters and stories weren't really fleshed out the way I would have liked them to be, because you have a really solid cast in this movie. If you've seen any of the posters or you've seen the trailers, you do have a really solid cast, as well as some people that I don't think will be too familiar to a lot of people who weren't familiar to me, but I think that the cast themselves all did a really solid job in this film. Nobody gave a bad performance. I just felt like they didn't really get the screen time that really they should have, especially when you see the marketing. It looks like some of these characters are going to be a bigger role in the film, and they show up for some of the most important parts in the movie, but you're not really that attached to them as a whole. But without a doubt, this movie is about Harley Quinn. It literally is all over the title. It's all over the marketing. This movie is centered on Harley Quinn, and I think Margot Robbie does a great job of kind of showing us a complexity in her character while also keeping it lighthearted, keeping it fun, keeping it silly, keeping it very Harley Quinn. I thoroughly did enjoy this movie. I do recommend it. I think if you're a fan of Suicide Squad or you plan on continuing on with the DCEU, whether they connect or not, I think that you'll thoroughly enjoy this film. I think you'll enjoy it for what it is. I think go in with tame expectations. It's nothing crazy narratively. I don't think you'll walk out of this movie feeling like you just watched the most amazing comic book movie with a strong story or that you're emotionally invested. But I was into it. Some really great action, great visuals, great acting, and I thoroughly enjoyed it from just an artistic standpoint. I think my only other gripe about this film was the fact that this film was R-rated, and outside of a couple of moments, mainly in the dialogue, I don't really feel like they took that R rating to the point that they could have. There is one really violent kill near the end of the film, but they don't really do much with the violence in this film. There's definitely moments where people are getting whacked with some pretty brutal attacks as well as weapons, and they don't really utilize the blood or things that they could have done to make it a little bit more edgy on the R-rated tip. Just the fact that they had that R rating and they didn't go in that direction was kind of disappointing at times. I don't think it takes away from how cool the action sequences were at all, but then there was moments where it did get kind of bloody and kind of get a little over the top, and I think, why didn't you do that for the rest of the movie? It mainly felt like the R rating was more about, hey, let's make this edgy, over the top dialogue where we can throw a lot of profanity in here, and I feel like they could have added a little bit more into the action and the violence in this film. And again, there are a couple moments that do have some pretty bloody moments in this film, but for the most part, I feel like it didn't really need the R rating, if I'm honest. So yeah, guys, that's gonna be my thoughts on Birds of Prey. I think the movie's a fun time. I don't think it's anything crazy. I think Margot Robbie gives a fantastic performance, and I did thoroughly enjoy her in this film. Artistically, this film is really well put together. The editing, the costume design, the set design, the CG, the action, all of that was really, really well done. I think it's a very fun movie to watch, especially if you're a comic book fan. I think if you enjoy Suicide Squad, it kind of feels like Suicide Squad rated R with a more lighthearted Marvel touch to it. It's very bright, it's very over the top, but it's still silly and kind of ridiculous like Suicide Squad was. I think it plays as a solid follow-up to Suicide Squad. However, like I mentioned, you don't even need to watch Suicide Squad to watch this movie. So if Suicide Squad didn't really interest you, maybe you skipped out on it and you're interested in checking this out, I think that you'll have a good time with it. And I think that you'll have a good time with Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn in this film. She's a big goofball and she takes the character in fun and interesting directions. I don't think it's a great film on an overall level, but I think it's definitely a good film that I highly recommend, and I think that you guys have a good time with it too. So yeah, guys, that's gonna be my thoughts on Birds of Prey. Leave your thoughts down below. Did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? I'm definitely curious. I feel like I can understand if you love this movie, and I can understand if you didn't like this movie. I kind of sat right in the middle. I enjoyed it for what it was. I wasn't crazy about it, but I had a good time with it. And then the girl that was sitting 2 seats to the left of me literally looked at her boyfriend and said, that was the greatest movie of all time. So it's really just gonna depend. And as far as just just from a female perspective, you know, watching this movie just as a dude, one thing that was really cool for me was outside of seeing these characters that I love from comic books kicking ass, it was awesome to just see this group of females, this group of badass chicks just kicking ass. I can't deny that. That was really cool to see. And I can only imagine that as a young girl or just ladies in general, you're gonna go watch this movie and it's gonna be pretty cool to see these badass women just kicking ass. They're really funny. There's little girl moments between them and these things that I found to be very charming. I was really into the action when all the girls were together on the screen. They did a really great job and they had a lot of really great chemistry. And then on top of the great chemistry between the characters, you have this great action with these great set designs and the choreography and the camera work. And yeah, it was really well put together film. I just wish I was more invested in the characters and their story, but what can you do? So yeah, guys, leave those thoughts down below. Did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? I'm definitely curious what you guys have to say, and I will see each and every single one of you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.